The ship hung in orbit above Earth like a silver knife waiting to cut. Ambassador stood at the viewing window of his personal quarters and looked down at the blue and green world below. He had seen dozens of planets like this. Small worlds filled with small creatures who thought they mattered. They never did. His assistant, a younger named, entered the room with a data tablet in his four-fingered hands. Ambassador, the humans have agreed to receive us. They are sending a shuttle to bring us to their council chamber. Made a sound of amusement. How generous of them. They send a shuttle to collect their new masters. Hesitated, sir. Our initial scans show some unusual readings from their planet. There appear to be energy signatures beneath the surface that we cannot fully identify. Primitive nuclear power, most likely. Said without concern. These young species always play with dangerous toys. Before they learn better, it is nothing. Prepare my formal robes. I want to look impressive when I deliver their future to them. The shuttle ride down to Earth was smooth and uneventful. Spent the journey reviewing what little the Dominion knew about humans. They had achieved faster than light travel only 60 years ago. They had made contact with various trading species and purchased technology like eager children buying sweets at a market. They had no military alliances, no powerful friends, and no significant fleet. They were perfect. The United Earth Council met in a great hall in a city called Geneva. Had seen grander buildings, but he admitted to himself that the humans had some sense of style. The hall was filled with representatives from every nation on the planet, all of them watching as he walked to the central platform. He counted over 200 faces, so many leaders. For such a small world, it was almost sad. People of Earth, began his voice, amplified by the translation device around his neck. I am of the Dominion. I come to you with an offer of great opportunity. He paused for effect. The humans watched him with expressions he could not quite read. Most species showed fear at this point. Some showed anger. The humans simply watched and waited. The Dominion spans 3,000 star systems, continued. We have brought order and prosperity to countless worlds. We offer you the chance to join this great family, to become a tributary species under our protection. A woman in the front row raised her hand, found the gesture oddly childlike. Yes, what exactly does tributary status mean? She asked. Her voice was calm and clear. It means you will pay tribute to the Dominion, 20% of your planetary resources each year. In exchange, you will receive our protection from hostile forces, access to our trade networks, and the guidance of a superior civilization. The woman nodded slowly. And if we decline this offer, smiled. It was the question they always asked. The Dominion does not accept rejection. Those who refuse our friendship receive our attention in other ways. Your world is small. Your defenses are weak. You have no allies who would risk war with us to protect you. I advise you to consider your position carefully. There was a long silence in the hall. Waited for the fear to show on their faces. He waited for the desperate whispers, the panic discussions, the inevitable acceptance of reality. Instead, the woman simply looked at her colleagues and then back at him. We will need time to discuss this among ourselves, she said. 30 days, I believe. You mentioned that is correct. 30 standard days. I suggest you use them wisely. Turn to leave, satisfied with how the Meeting had gone. As he walked toward the exit, he passed a man in a military uniform who sat quietly in the corner of the room. The man had gray hair and a face marked by age and experience. He had not spoken during the entire meeting. He had simply watched. Their eyes met for a brief moment. The military man nodded politely, nodded back and continued walking. He thought nothing of it, back on his ship prepared his report for the Dominion High Command. Earth will submit, he wrote. They showed no significant resistance to our terms. Their leaders are cautious and practical. They understand their weakness. I expect formal acceptance. Within 2 weeks, this world will be an easy addition to our territory. He sent the report and poured himself a drink. Another successful mission. Another world brought into the fold. The Dominion would be pleased. In Geneva, the council chamber emptied slowly. The representatives returned to their nations to begin the discussions that expected, but in a small room beneath the main hall, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Admiral sat at the head of a table surrounded by military leaders from 12 nations. He was the gay-haired man who had watched so carefully. He had commanded Earth's combined defense forces for 15 years, and he had spent every one of those years preparing for a moment exactly like this one. Report, he said simply. Younger officer pulled up a holographic display. The ship is a standard diplomatic vessel, light weapons, minimal shields, but based on intelligence from our trading contacts, a full Dominion fleet would be significantly more dangerous. We estimate 12 to 20 warships for a standard enforcement action. Can we defeat 12 warships? Asked the general from the European alliance. Considered the question with what we have revealed to the galaxy. No, we would be destroyed in hours. The room fell silent. Then a woman from the Asian Federation spoke, and with what we have not revealed, allowed himself a small smile. That is a different question entirely. For 60 years, humanity had played the role of the eager newcomer. They had bought technology from traders. They had asked innocent questions. They had appeared to struggle with basic engineering challenges that other species had solved long ago, and all the while in facilities hidden underground and in bases constructed in the darkest corners of the solar system. They had been building, not because they wanted war. Humans had hoped, truly hoped, that the galaxy would be a place of friendship and cooperation. But they had also studied history, their own history filled with empires that demanded tribute and crushed those who refused. They knew how such stories usually ended for the weak. So they had prepared quietly, patiently. Just in case, they expect us to surrender, said. They expect us to be afraid. They expect us to behave like every other species they have conquered. He looked around the table at the faces of men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting their world. I suggest we show them something different. The preparations began that night. Messages were sent through secure channels, hidden facilities activated. Ships that officially did not exist began their final construction phases. Above Earth, ambassadors slept peacefully, dreaming of his promotion and the rewards that would come from adding another world to the Dominion. He had no idea that below him, humanity was waking up. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. It had confused patience for weakness. It had mistaken silence for submission. It had looked at humanity and seen just another primitive species waiting to be conquered. They would learn otherwise. They would learn fast. Earth's response arrived on the 28th day. Ambassador read it 3 times because he could not believe what he was seeing. The message was polite, almost friendly in its tone. It thanked the Dominion for the offer. It expressed hope for peaceful relations in the future. And then in clear and simple language it declined tributary status, stood in his quarters and stared at the words on his screen. In his 40 years of diplomatic service, no species had ever refused the Dominion's offer. Some had negotiated, some had begged for better her terms, some had wept and pleaded, but none had simply said no. He contacted the Dominion High Command. Immediately, there has been a miscalculation, he reported. The humans have rejected our terms. I recommend immediate corrective action. Response came within hours. 12 warships were being dispatched to Earth. Their mission was simple. They would blockade the planet and cut off all trade and communication. The humans would be isolated, starved, and brought to their senses. It was a strategy that had worked 100 times before. It would work again. Overseer commanded the correction fleet. He was a veteran of 6 pacification campaigns, who had made his reputation by crushing resistance quickly and efficiently. Snorts when he received his orders. He felt almost disappointed. Earth was a small world with no military presence worth mentioning. This would not be challenge, it would be an errand. His fleet arrived in Earth's solar system 2 weeks later. The 12 warships took positions around the planet. Their weapon systems active and visible, sent a message to the surface. People of Earth, your rejection of Dominion protection has been noted. Until you reconsider your position, no ships will be permitted to enter or leave your system. All communication with outside worlds is now blocked. This blockade will continue until you accept your proper place in the Dominion. He expected panic. He expected desperate calls for negotiation. He expected the humans to realize their mistake and beg for forgiveness. Instead, he received nothing. The first day passed in silence, then the second, then a week. Monitored all communication channels, but Earth had gone completely quiet. No broadcast, no distress signals, no attempts at negotiation. The planet simply sat there, blue and green and peaceful, as if the 12 warships surrounding it did not exist. Perhaps they are in shock, suggested his second in command, a younger named. Some species take time to process their situation. Perhaps, agreed, though something about the silence bothered him. Conquered species behaved in predictable ways. They panicked. They fought among themselves. They blamed their leaders. They did not simply go quiet. He ordered enhanced scans of the planet. The reports came back normal. Cities were functioning. Power systems were active. There were no signs of civil unrest or governmental collapse. The humans were going about their daily lives as if nothing had changed. They are either very stupid or very confident, said. Either way, hunger will change their mind soon enough. But the weeks continued to pass and Earth showed no signs of suffering. Learned that the planet was largely self-sufficient. Food production. They had vast reserves of energy. They had prepared for this situation in ways he had not anticipated. How long can they hold out? He asked his logistics officer. The officer reviewed The data, at their current consumption rate, possibly years, they are far more prepared than our initial assessment suggested. Felt the first stirring of unease. He had expected a quick victory, a simple demonstration of Dominion power. Instead, he was trapped in an extended siege against an enemy that refused to acknowledge his presence. He sent regular reports to high command. Each report contained the same information. The blockade was holding. The humans had not surrendered. Snorts. No military action had been taken because there was nothing to shoot at. Earth had no fleet, no orbital defenses, no weapons platforms. The humans were simply waiting. What are they waiting for? Asked one evening as they reviewed the latest scans. Did not have an answer. 6 weeks into the blockade, he woke to the sound of alarms. Red lights flashed across his quarters as the ship's alert system screamed warnings. He ran to the command center, his heart's pounding in his chest. Report, he demanded. Looked up from his console, his face pale with shock. Ships, overseer. Human ships. They are coming out of all around us. How many? We are still counting. 50. 100. 200. Paused as his console updated. Over 300 confirmed. More arriving every moment. Stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The space around Earth was filling with ships, not small vessels or converted freighters. These were warships, real warships built for combat, armed with weapons that his sensors struggled to identify. That is impossible, he whispered. They had no fleet. Our intelligence confirmed. They had no fleet. It appears our intelligence was wrong, said quietly. The human ships were unlike anything in Dominion records. They were angular and practical, designed without concern for elegance. Their hulls were thick with armor. Their weapon systems were massive, oversized by galactic standards. They looked like they had been built by people who expected to take damage and intended to survive it. A communication signal came through. Human face appeared on the screen. Woman in a military uniform with hard eyes and a calm voice. Fleet, this is Admiral Sarah of the United Earth Defense Force. You are surrounded. Your weapons are outmatched. Your shields are inadequate. You have exactly 10 minutes to power down your systems and surrender. If you attempt to flee or fight, you will be destroyed. This is your only warning. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. His fleet of 12 warships, the pride of the Dominion's enforcement arm, was surrounded by an enemy that should not exist. Overseer said urgently, what are your orders? Looked at the tactical display. The human ships were moving into attack formation, their weapons powering up. He calculated the odds in his head and found no path to victory. He could fight and die, or he could surrender and live. Power down our weapons, he said, his voice hollow. Signal our surrender. The battle that he had expected never happened. Instead, human Marines boarded his ship within the hour. They were efficient and professional, taking control of each vessel without unnecessary violence. Was escorted to a holding cell along with his officers. As he walked through the corridors of his own ship under human guard, he noticed something that chilled him to his core. The human soldiers were not celebrating. They were not gloating or showing signs of satisfaction. They moved with the quiet focus of people who had practiced this scenario many times before. This was not a desperate defense. This was not a lucky surprise. This was a plan that had been prepared years in advance, waiting for exactly this moment. The Dominion had walked into a trap, and now, as would soon learn, the trap was only beginning to close. Admiral stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolute and watched the captured vessels being escorted to secure holding areas near Mars. The operation had gone exactly as planned. Not a single human life lost, not a single ship damaged, 12 enemy warships captured intact along with their crews. It was a perfect victory, and it was only the beginning, Admiral said. Commander Tor, his chief tactical officer, we have completed analysis of the communication systems. We can now monitor their military channels across this sector. Show me. The main display shifted to show a map of nearby space. Red dots indicated Dominion installations, supply stations, communication relays, and patrol routes that had built an extensive network to support their operations in this region of the galaxy. That network was about to become a liability. How long until the Dominion High Command realizes their fleet has been captured? Asked. Based on their standard reporting procedures, we estimate 48 hours before they become concerned, perhaps 72 before they dispatch investigators. Nodded. 72 hours, enough time to change the shape of the entire conflict. Execute Phase 2, he ordered. Across the solar system, the United Earth Defense Force mobilized, 300 warships divided into strike groups of varying sizes. Each group had specific targets, communication relays that would blind the Dominion to human movements, supply stations that would starve their forward bases, patrol vessels that would never report what they had seen. The humans moved with speed and coordination that the galaxy had never witnessed. Their ships were fast, faster than Dominion vessels by a significant margin. Their weapons were devastating, designed to punch through shields and armor with brutal efficiency, but most importantly, their crews were exceptional. Human pilots had grown up playing competitive games that demanded split-second reactions. Human gunners had trained on simulations that pushed their minds to the absolute limit. Human commanders had studied every conflict in their species' long and bloody history, learning from thousands of years of warfare. The Dominion had conquered species who had never known war, species who had developed in peaceful conditions and had no concept of military strategy. They were not prepared for humans. The first strike hit a communication relay station on the edge of Dominion space. The attack lasted less than 4 minutes. Human ships dropped out of, destroyed the station's defensive systems, boarded the facility, downloaded all stored data, and vanished before any distress signal could be sent. The second strike hit 3 patrol vessels simultaneously. The crews barely had time to register the attack before their ships were disabled and captured. More prisoners, more intelligence, more understanding of Dominion weaknesses. By the end of the first week, humanity had seized 14 installations and captured over 2,000 Dominion personnel. The attacks were surgical and precise. No unnecessary destruction, no civilian casualties. Every target was military. Every action calculated to achieve maximum strategic effect with minimum loss of life. Admiral reviewed the reports each evening, but he took no pleasure in the victories. He understood what was coming. The Dominion would respond with overwhelming force. They would send a fleet large enough to crush Earth in. Everyone who had dared to defy them. The current campaign was not about winning the war, it was about buying time and building allies. The first ally came from an unexpected source. There were a tributary species who had served the Dominion for 300 years. They were not warriors by nature, they were builders and engineers forced to construct warships for their masters. When human forces liberated a shipyard in the third week of the campaign, they expected fear and resistance. Instead, the workers welcomed them with tears of joy. "You have no idea what this means," said Elder, the facility's senior overseer. "For generations we have built weapons for those who enslave us. We have watched the Dominion grow stronger while our people suffer, and now you come, you fight them, you win." Met with the elder personally via communication link. "We did not come to conquer you," he said. "We came to free you. What you do with that freedom is your choice. Then let us help," replied. "We know the Dominion ships better than anyone. We built them. We know their weaknesses. Let us show you how to destroy them." The alliance with the was the first of many. As word spread of humanity's victories, other tributary species began to reach out. Some offered intelligence, some offered resources, some simply offered hope, the first hope they had felt in centuries. Within 2 months, humanity had established a network of allies across Dominion border space, former subjects who had been waiting for anyone to challenge their oppressors. They had watched species after species submit to Dominion rule. They had believed resistance was impossible. Humanity proved them wrong, but the Dominion was not sleeping. High Command had received reports of the attacks. They had analyzed the patterns. They understood that Earth was not simply defending itself. Earth was waging an offensive war. Overseer still held prisoner aboard a human vessel, was brought before an intelligence officer. For questioning, he answered their questions without resistance. There was no point in loyalty to an empire that had sent him on a mission without warning him of the danger. "They will send everything," he told the human officer. "You have embarrassed them. You have made them look weak. They cannot allow that. They will assemble the largest fleet in Dominion history and come for your world." "How large?" the officer asked. "Consider the question. 2,000 ships, perhaps more, every vessel they can spare from other territories. They will leave themselves vulnerable elsewhere to crush you. It is a matter of pride now." The officer nodded and thanked him for the information, watched her leave, and wondered if the humans understood what was coming. 2,000 warships, even with their surprising capabilities, even with their allies. Could they survive such a force? Answer was being prepared on Earth. Factories that had operated in secret for decades were now running at full capacity. New ships were being constructed at a rate that galactic norms. The engineers had shared their knowledge and human builders had improved upon it. Each new vessel was better than the last. Admiral stood before the United Earth Council and delivered his assessment. The Dominion fleet will arrive in approximately 4 months. We cannot defeat them through direct confrontation alone, but we will not be alone. He activated a holographic display showing the current state of their alliance. 17 species had committed forces to the defense of Earth, former tributaries who would rather die fighting than return to slavery. Combined fleet would number over 800 ships. It will not be enough to guarantee victory, admitted, but it will be enough to make them bleed, and that is what matters. The Dominion survives because they have never faced a real cost for their conquests. We are going to teach them what cost means. The Council approved his plan unanimously. Earth would not hide, Earth would not run, Earth would stand and fight alongside every ally who chose to stand with them for months. That was how long humanity had to prepare for the battle that would decide the fate of not just one world, but perhaps the entire galaxy. The countdown had begun. The Dominion fleet arrived on a Tuesday. Admiral remembered thinking how strange it was that the most important day human history would be a Tuesday, not some special date, not an anniversary, just an ordinary day that would become extraordinary. The sensors detected them first, a wall of energy signatures at the edge of the solar system, so dense that the initial reading seemed like an error. 2,147 warships, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Enough firepower to glass a planet 10 times over, stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched the enemy fleet approach around him. His officers worked with calm efficiency. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. Fear was a luxury they could not afford. All coalition forces report ready. Commander Tor announced 812 ships in defensive formation. Planetary shields are at full power. Ground-based weapons are online. 800 against 2,000. The mathematics were not encouraging, but mathematics did not account for everything. The Dominion fleet stopped at the outer edge of the system. A communication request came through, accepted it, and the face of High Admiral appeared on the screen. Was the Supreme Commander of Dominion military forces, a legendary figure who had never lost a battle in his 200-year career. Humans, said his voice deep and cold, you have caused considerable trouble. You have destroyed our property. You have stolen our subjects. You have insulted the Dominion in ways that cannot be forgiven. Waited in silence. I offer you one final opportunity. Continued. Surrender now. Disband your fleet. Return to your planet and accept permanent occupation. If you do this, I will spare your civilian population. Refu and I will burn your world to ash and scatter the ashes across the void. Looked at the faces of his bridge crew. They looked back at him with steady eyes. No fear, no doubt, just determination. High Admiral said, I have a counter offer. Turn your fleet around and go home. Release all tributary species from Dominion control, except that the age of conquest is over. If you do this, we will allow you to leave in peace. Stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. You are surrounded. You are outnumbered nearly 3-1, and you offer me terms. I am not offering you terms, replied. I am offering you a chance to survive. The communication ended. The battle began. The Dominion fleet advanced in a massive wave. Confident in their overwhelming numbers, they expected the coalition forces to break and scatter. They expected panic and chaos. They expected an easy victory. They were wrong. The coalition fleet held formation as the enemy approached. They did not retreat. They did not flee. They waited until the Dominion ships entered optimal weapons range, and then they unleashed everything they had. Human weapons technology had advanced significantly since the first contact with alien traders. The coalition ships fired concentrated energy beams that punched through Dominion shields like paper. They launched missiles that adapted to defensive countermeasures and found their targets with terrifying accuracy. They deployed electronic warfare systems that confused enemy sensors and disrupted communications. The first wave of Dominion ships dissolved under the barrage, 100 vessels destroyed in the opening minutes of the battle, then 200, then 300. Watched his tactical display with growing disbelief. His ships were dying faster than he had thought possible. The coalition forces were fighting with a ferocity and skill that everything he knew about warfare. Concentrate fire on their flagship, he ordered. Kill their commander. 500 Dominion ships turned their weapons toward the Resolute. Energy beams and missiles converged on a single point. The human flagship should have been vaporized in seconds. Instead, the Resolute shields held. The ship rocked under the assault but did not break. Gripped his command chair as the bridge shook around him, but his voice remained steady. Return fire all batteries. The Resolute was not just a command vessel. It was a weapon platform unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Its main guns fired concentrated antimatter bursts that could crack a planet's crust. In that moment, those guns spoke with terrible authority. 3 Dominion cruisers vanished in blinding explosions, then 5 more, then 10. The battle raged for hours. Coalition ships fell, their crews dying to protect their. But for every coalition ship destroyed, 3 Dominion vessels were lost. The mathematics were changing slowly, painfully. The impossible was becoming possible. The turning point came when the ships entered the fight. Elder had insisted on leading his people personally. Their vessels were not built for combat, but they carried something more valuable than weapons. They carried the knowledge of Dominion ship construction. Target their secondary power conduits. Broadcast to the coalition fleet. Frequency 773. It will bypass their shields entirely. The coalition adjusted their targeting. Suddenly, Dominion ships that had been shrugging off attacks began to fail. Engines exploded, weapons went dark. Vessels that had seemed invincible became helpless. Watched his fleet dying and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear, real overwhelming fear. High Admiral, his tactical officer, reported, voice shaking, "We have lost over half our forces. Enemy casualties are less than 200 ships. We cannot win this engagement." Looked at Earth on his display, the small blue world that had his entire civilization, the primitive species that had shattered the myth of Dominion. Invincibility. "Order a retreat," he said the words, tasting like poison in his mouth. "All ships disengage and withdraw." The Dominion fleet broke. Ships that had entered the system with absolute confidence now fled in desperate chaos. Coalition forces pursued them to the edge of the solar system, destroying stragglers and capturing those too damaged to escape. When it was over, sat in his command chair and looked at the casualty reports. 214 coalition ships lost, 47,000 lives. The cost had been terrible, but the Dominion had lost over 200 vessels, their supreme fleet, the greatest military force in their history, had been broken, and across the galaxy everyone was watching, opened channeled to the coalition fleet. His voice was with exhaustion, but his words were clear. Today we proved that tyranny can be defeated. Today we showed the galaxy that no empire is too powerful to challenge. Today we did the impossible. He paused, looking out at the stars. Honor those who gave their lives. Remember their sacrifice and prepare yourselves. This war is not over, but today we took the first step toward victory. On Earth, people poured into the streets. They wept and cheered and held each other. They had survived against all odds, against an enemy that had seemed invincible. They had survived. And in the corridors of Dominion power, panic was spreading. The unthinkable had happened. Their fleet had been defeated. Their reputation had been shattered, and across their vast empire, tributary species were beginning to ask a dangerous question: if humanity could win, why couldn't they? The Dominion Empire crumbled faster than anyone had predicted. Within 6 months of the Battle of Earth, over 200 tributary species had declared independence. Rebellions erupted on worlds that had been quiet for centuries. The military forces that might have suppressed these uprisings had been destroyed or were needed to protect core Dominion systems. High Admiral never made it back to Dominion space. His flagship suffered a critical engine failure during the retreat. Some said it was damaged from the battle. Others whispered that his own crew had sabotaged the vessel rather than face the shame of returning defeated. Whatever the truth, died alone in the void. The first High Admiral Dominion history to lose a war. Ambassador was recalled to the Dominion capital to explain how his simple diplomatic mission had led to the greatest disaster in their civilization's history. He never arrived. His transport disappeared in transit, and no investigation was ever conducted. The Dominion had no interest in answers. They only wanted someone to blame. 1 year after the battle, a new delegation arrived at Earth. They came not in a warship, but in a diplomatic vessel, unarmed and undefended. They requested permission to land and negotiate peace. The United Earth Council granted their request. Admiral was present for the negotiations, though he no longer wore his uniform. He had retired from military service. The day after the victory, I spent my entire career preparing for war, he had told the council. Now I would like to spend whatever time I have left preparing for peace. The Dominion delegation was led by a new figure, a diplomat named who had risen through the chaos of the Empire's collapse. She was younger than most Dominion leaders and carried herself with a humility that would have been unthinkable a year ago. We come to discuss terms, said as she faced the council. The Dominion acknowledges that we cannot continue this conflict. We seek an end to hostilities. The council chair, a woman named Dr. Maria Santos, studied the delegation carefully. What terms do you propose? Took a deep breath. The Dominion will release all tributary species from their obligations. We will recognize their independence and their right to self-governance. We will pay reparations for the resources extracted over centuries of occupation, and we will disband our offensive military forces, maintaining only what is necessary for defense. The chamber was silent. These were not the terms of a negotiation. These were terms of surrender. In exchange, continued, we ask only that humanity does not pursue our destruction. Allow us to exist. Allow us to rebuild as a smaller, humbler nation. Allow us the chance to become something better than what we were. Watched the young diplomat with interest. She seemed sincere, but he had seen enough of galactic politics to know that sincerity could fade quickly when circumstances changed. Dr. Santos conferred with her colleagues. Before responding, the Earth Coalition accepts these terms with one addition. We propose the creation of a galactic assembly, a body where all species can participate as equals. The Dominion will have a voice in this assembly, the same as any other member, no more, no less. Blinked in surprise. You would give us equal standing after everything we have done. We would give you the opportunity to earn it, Santos replied. What you do with that opportunity is up to you. The treaty was signed 3 days later. The Galactic Assembly was established with Earth as its headquarters, though the founders made clear that no single world would control the organization. Former tributary species sent representatives. Independent nations that had avoided Dominion control joined as well. Even some worlds, those who had opposed the expansion policies, chose to participate. It was not a perfect system. There were disputes and disagreements. Old grudges did not vanish overnight. Some species refused to work with others. Some conflicts had to be mediated. Some failed entirely. But it was a beginning. 5 years after the Battle of Earth, a memorial was unveiled in Geneva. It stood in the same hall where Ambassador had delivered his ultimatum, transformed now into a museum of the conflict. The memorial bore the names of every coalition soldier who had died in the war. 47,000 names carved in black stone attended the ceremony. Though he avoided the speeches and the crowds, he stood instead at the back of the hall looking at the names. So many names, so many lives. A young approached him, recognized Elder's granddaughter, who now served as her people's representative to the Galactic Assembly. Admir, she said softly, my grandfather asked me to find you. He wanted you to have this. She handed him a small metal disc, turned it over his hands. It was a memory crystal, the kind used to record important messages. What is it? He asked, his final words. He passed away last month. Eyes glistened. He said you would understand what he wanted to say. Activated the crystal later that night, alone in his apartment. His face appeared old and tired but peaceful. Admiral, the recording began. By the time you see this, I will be gone, but I wanted to thank you one final time, not for winning the war. Any great military leader might have done that. I wanted to thank you for what happened after. Image smiled gently. When my people were freed, I expected humanity to become the new masters of the galaxy. You had the power, you had the fleet, you could have built an empire greater than the Dominion ever was. Instead, you offered us partnership. You gave us a voice. You treated us as equals. The old leaned forward, his expression earnest. In 300 years of servitude, no species ever treated us with kindness. We had forgotten what it meant to be respected. You reminded us that is a gift greater than any military victory. The recording ended, sat in the darkness for a long time, thinking about the old engineer's words. Humanity had been given a choice. They had won a war against impossible odds. They had emerged as the most powerful military force in the galaxy. They could have done anything they wanted. No one could have stopped them. They chose mercy. they chose. Partnership, they chose to build. Something new rather than simply replace. The old masters with new ones, it was the most human decision possible. They next morning walked through the streets of Geneva. The city had changed in 5 years. Alien visitors were common now. Tourists and diplomats and students from dozens of worlds, they walked alongside. Humans sharing meals, having conversations, building the kind of connections that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. A group of children ran past him, human and in all. Playing together, they were chasing a ball, laughing, completely unaware of the history that had brought them to this moment. Smiled as he watched them. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. When they underestimated humanity, they had learned that lesson in fire and blood, but the lesson that mattered more was still being taught day by day in small acts of kindness and cooperation. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they could fight. Now they were showing the galaxy something far more important. They could forgive, they could build, they could hope, and that in the end was what made them truly dangerous.